Kirsty measured the length of her shadow every hour on one sunny day. She plotted her results on this graph. Look at the graph, estimate the length of Kirsty's shadow at 3:30. So we have the time on the bottom, and 3:30 is right in the middle of 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Now, what we need to do is imagine if these dots were connected, where would the lines cross? Well, it would probably be at about this point here. And we need to understand how to read this scale. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines to get from 0 to 100. So if we divide 100 by 5, that tells us that each line is an extra 20 centimetres. So if this point here is 100, then the line above will be 120, and then above that we have 140. So we can see that our line is between those, but it's slightly closer to 140, so I would estimate 135 centimetres. Now estimate a time when her shadow was 180 centimetres long. So we have 100, 120, 140. The next line will be 160, because remember, it's 20 more each time, and so we have 180 here. So we can draw a line across, and if these dots were joined up, they would probably cross 180 at about this point here. So I would estimate this time is 9:40 a.m. because it's slightly closer to 10 o'clock than it is to 9 o'clock. But you get the mark for an estimate of between 9:30 and 9:50. The number in A is twice the number in D. The number in B is 5 less than the number in C. The number in D is 10 more than the number in B. Write the missing numbers in this diagram. So we're told that A is 50, so let's look for a sentence where A is mentioned. A is in this first sentence, and we're told that the number in A is twice the number in D. So half of 50 is 25, which means the number in D must be 25. 2 times 25 is 50, and that means the number in A is twice or 2 times the number in D. Now let's look for a sentence which mentions D. That's this third sentence, and we're told the number in D is 10 more than the number in B. So if we subtract 10 from 25, we know that the number in B must be 15, because that's 10 less than the number in D, or the number in D, so 25 is 10 more than the number in B, 10 more than 15. So now the number in B is 5 less than the number in C, and 15 is 5 less than 20. If we add 5 to 15, we get 20, so C is 20. Now use the same rule for this diagram. So here we're told that C is 50. So let's look for a sentence which mentions C. The number in B is 5 less than the number in C. So in B we will have 45 because that's 5 less than 50. Now if we look for a different sentence which mentions B, we can have the number in D is 10 more than the number in B. So in D we will have 55 because that's 10 more than 45. And now the number in A is twice the number in D. So if we work out 55 times 2, that gives us 110 as our number for A. Write in the missing numbers. 1 has been done for you. So 3 times 100 is 300. What is 1 1/2 times 100? Well, there are different ways that we can do this. We can either partition, and 1 times 100 is 100, half times 100 is 50, so putting that together gives us 150. Or what we could do is turn our mixed number into an improper fraction, so that's 3 over 2, because 1 times 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3, and the denominator stays the same, and then we can multiply that by 100. But remember, when we're multiplying a fraction by a whole number, we only multiply the numerator and the denominator stays the same. So we have 300 over 2. But to turn that back into a whole number, we can divide the numerator by the denominator, and that gives us 150. Notice 1½ is half of 3, and 150 is half of 300. So now, what is 3/4 times 100? Remember, we only multiply the numerator and the denominator stays the same. 3 times 100 is 300, the denominator is still 4, and then to turn it back into a whole number, we need to divide the numerator by the denominator, and 300 divided by 4 is 75, so that's our answer. For each of the 4 sentences below, put a tick if it is true, put a cross if it is not true. First, a triangle can have 2 acute angles. So remember, an acute angle is less than 90 degrees, or less than a right angle. And a right angle is like the corner of a piece of paper, or the corner of this screen. So a triangle can have 2 acute angles, because in this triangle, both of these angles are acute. So our first statement is true. Now, a triangle can have 2 obtuse angles. That's not true. Angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. Obtuse angles are more than 90 degrees, so more than a right angle. So if you have 2 obtuse angles, you have more than 180 degrees. Our third sentence, a triangle can have 2 parallel sides. Remember, parallel sides are lines that would go on forever without ever crossing. But a shape with parallel sides must have at least 4 sides. There's no way that we can connect parallel lines without making at least 4 sides. So this statement is false. And finally, we have statement number 4. A triangle can have 2 perpendicular sides. So perpendicular lines are lines which would cross at right angles if we extended them. Lines on a right angle are perpendicular, and we can have a right-angled triangle. So this statement is true. Draw an arrow to show the position for 7,500. So we have 0 and 10,000 labelled on our number line, and to get from 0 to 10,000 we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines. So if we divide 10,000 by 10, that gives us 1,000. So we know that each line represents an increase of 1,000. So we have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. Now 7,500 will be right in the middle of 7,000 and 8,000, so we need to draw our arrow here. And the reason for that is because 500 is half of 1,000, so our arrow is halfway between 7,000 and 8,000. That's 7,500. The area of a rectangle is 16 centimetres squared. One of the sides is 2 centimetres long. What is the perimeter of the rectangle? So this question mentions both area and perimeter, and it's important that we remember what these words mean. The area of a shape is the amount of space that it takes up, or the amount of stuff that's in it, whereas the perimeter is the distance around the outside of a shape. So if we draw our rectangle, we know that one of the sides is 2 centimeters long, but it's a rectangle, and with rectangles, opposite sides are always the same length. So to find the area, we multiply the width times the length. So 2 times whatever the length is equals 16 centimeters squared. Well, 2 times 8 is 16, and that means the length of our rectangle must be 8 centimeters. So 8 plus 8 plus 2 plus 2 is 20, which means the perimeter is 20 centimeters. Notice area is given in centimeters squared, but perimeter we just write centimeters. Write the missing fractions. First we have 3/10 plus 3/5 plus something equals 7/5. Now when we're adding fractions, we need the denominators to be the same, so we need to change our fifths into tenths. We can find equivalent fractions, so 3/5 is the same as 6/10 because 5 times 2 is 10 and 3 times 2 is 6. 7/5 is the same as 14/10. 5 times 2 is 10, 7 times 2 is 14. So now that we've got our denominators the same, we know the denominator will also be 10 with our missing number. 3 plus 6 is 9, and then 9 plus 5 is 14, so our missing fraction is 5/10, which we could simplify to 1/2. Now 5/12 plus something minus 1/6 equals 7/12. So again, we need to make our denominators the same. 12 is in the 6 times table, 6 times 2 is 12, so we do the same to the numerator, 1 times 2 is 2. So now we really have 5/12 plus something minus 2/12 is 7/12. So before we subtracted the 2/12, we would have had 9/12. Our denominator will be 12, and 5 plus 4 is 9, then 9 minus 2 is 7, so our missing fraction is 4/12, which we could simplify to 1/3 or 2/6. A shop sells food for birds. Lara has £10 to spend on peanuts. How many bags of peanuts can she get for £10? So we know that peanuts cost £1.35 for a bag. So what we can do is keep on adding £1.35 until we get to £10. So one bag is £1.35, which means that 2 bags is £2.70, because £1.35 times 2 is £2.70. But that's not close to £10, so what we can do is double, and that tells us that 4 bags cost £5.40, because £2.70 times 2 is £5.40, and of course 2 times 2 is 4. Now if we double that, we'll go over £10. So what we can do instead is work out 6 bags. We can get the cost of 6 bags by adding the cost of 2 bags to the cost of 4 bags, and £2.70 plus £5.40 is £8.10. Now, if we add another 2 bags, that would be too many. That would take us over £10. So if we just add another £1.35, so 1 more bag, we get £9.45, and that's 7 bags. Now, if we added £1.35, that would be too many. That would take us over £10, and Lara only has £10 to spend. So she can buy 7 bags of peanuts. Place these fractions in order of size, starting with the smallest. So here we need to compare fractions, but we have different denominators, and to compare fractions, it's easier if the denominators are the same. Now our largest denominator is 12, that's not our largest fraction, but our largest denominator, and 12 is in the 2 times table, it's in the 3 times table, and it's in the 6 times table. So we can find equivalent fractions which have a denominator of 12. We can use multiplication. 2 times 6 is 12, and what we do to the denominator, we do to the numerator as well, and 1 times 6 is 6. So 1/2 is equivalent to 6/12. We can find an equivalent fraction for 1/3, so that's 4/12, and for 5/6, which is 10/12. So now that we have our equivalent fractions, we can see that the smallest fraction is 1/3, because that's only equivalent to 4/12. Then we have 5/12, then 1/2, because that's equivalent to 6/12, and then our largest fraction is 5/6, because that's equivalent to 10/12. Grace made purple paint by mixing 3 colours. 50% was red, 30% was blue, and the rest was white. What percentage of the purple paint was white? So we need to remember that percentages have to add up to 100%. So if 50% was red and 30% was blue, that means that 80% was either red or blue. So 80% plus whatever is white needs to add up to 100%. And 100 minus 80 is 20. So that means 20% of the paint was white, because 50 plus 30 plus 20 gives us 100%.